Good evening. Welcome, everybody, once again to Boom Time. And this month, I'm going to do something absolutely ridiculously different, which I'll come on to in a second. But I'm absolutely thrilled and excited to have our wonderful guest on tonight, the incredible Sam Conniff, someone I've known for a good few years, done various bits of work with. But the last two things that he's done, frankly, for me, have really hit home, and I just loved the work that he's done. I've been really passionate about it, and I really wanted to bring some of that to Boom Time this evening. So we're live. Welcome. You can ask questions, join in, chat, anything that you have, share as we go through, because this is going to be something that we encourage. And tonight is all about the power of uncertainty. And Sam, for those who don't know him, but I'm sure many people do, of course, is an author. He's the co-founder of Livity, which is where he originally did some work together many years ago with Diesel. And I've always, Sam and I have bumped into each other over the years. And he's one of those people we were just talking about earlier when we were chatting before the show, who I often find we can talk for quite a long time, even though we haven't seen each other for quite some time. So that's something that we'll get into a little bit later on. Sam's last book, if you haven't read it, I absolutely recommend you do. We might touch on it a bit tonight. Was Be More Pirate, which absolutely fantastic book, a book after my own heart. That actually gave lots of parallels with how pirates transformed culture, with how we should be thinking about it now. And Sam and I were on stage actually for the Evening Standard. I think it was a young person's forum that we talked about. I remember Sam saying, look at the state of culture as it is now. Look at the way young people are now. Look at the way millennials, everyone's got a side hustle, everyone's doing something. The world is fundamentally changing. And I don't need to tell you the world's fundamentally changed in the last 2 years, because it still is changing. And that's going to be the focus of tonight, because Sam's latest project is the absolutely fantastic Uncertainty Experts, which is something that Sam started and worked on through lockdown. We're going to understand a little bit more today, but it's a very immersive, experience-driven bit of scientific research that is fundamentally changing the world and fundamentally changing how people experience uncertainty. In fact, so much so that I took the uncertainty survey today, and I found out, much to my, I don't know what the word is, but I couldn't believe it, frankly. I came across as an uncertainty apprentice, which wasn't where I thought I was going to be at all. But what it did make me do is do two things. Firstly, I decided tonight that I'm not going to do loads of preparation like I normally do and present Sam a load of questions. I'm going to sit in the discomfort and the uncertainty that is this situation and deal with it. And also, just 2 seconds before, Sam said, don't read the script that you've written for the intro, which I haven't. So that intro was all totally off the cuff. So, Sam, welcome to the show this evening from your beautiful kitchen.
Hello, Scott. It's really lovely to see you. And I share all of those sentiments about you. I've loved getting to know you over the years. And it is one of those lovely relationships that you can touch in on. And there's so much shared experience and knowledge. And it's lovely to have someone that you look up to that you kind of think of as a friend as well. So thanks very much. And thanks for having me along. And well done for rising to and I only made the challenge because you kind of apologized and said, I am going to read this bit of script. Like that was the problem. So when we find ourselves doing that thing and slightly apologizing, but there's a clue in that, and there you go. Fantastic introduction, off the cuff, embracing uncertainty.
There we go. Well, let's start there, because I mean, I always say in all these shows, I don't need to tell anyone that the world is massively uncertain. But what I do want people to reflect on is the fact that uncertainty is quite powerful, and the work that you're doing around uncertainty is helping reframe what we think uncertainty is and what it's about. But I'd just like to ask you, how are you feeling going through these most uncertain of times? And what did you learn over lockdown or the uncertainty? And how's it framed or shaped how you're feeling now?
It is a paradox, as I think life is. And I think that is the hard thing. I think there's that F. Scott Fitzgerald line, I can't remember exactly what the line is. It's a sign of a first-rate intelligence to be able to hold two conflicting ideas in mind at once. And I'm not suggesting that I have a first-rate intelligence, far from it, but I aspire to one. And so being able to hold on to the opposites and the parallels is really important, because in one sense, the uncertainty of the last period of time has been an absolute disaster show for me. The first time I was going to do this show, I backed out of it because of the anxiety that I was facing. I didn't feel like I could show up and do justice to this, and I had to apologize to you and felt awful for it, but I really was having a hard time. My business model relied on this new world of becoming an author, which was a lot of travel, workshopping, basically flying and breathing on people in rooms, which was no business model for a pandemic. And I have just before that, I'd gone through a separation. I've got 2 kids, so I've got an awful lot of domestic responsibility, which is great. And in the world that I was in, with the flexibility and financial income from that life, was wonderful. But bloody hell, man, I've not gone this close to the wire since, my early days of really early business and taking risks, and when you can get away with it. It's been horrid, really difficult times. I've found myself at one point of last year, doing early stage of investigating insolvency. It's been really, really to the wire. And my deepest sympathies with everybody else, because everybody's experienced it to some degree. There's difficulties for everyone. It's been very subjective. But yeah, it's been very hard. But on the other sense, right from the outset, I had this really, really bell ringing in my head that there is a chance here, because I'm someone that's been advocating for change all my life. And I was aware of the irony that when change came, it knocked me over. I should have been good at it. And I'm like, got to change the world.
But chaos does precede change, as they always say. So you might have been sitting in the chaos.
Yeah, I didn't. I just sat in a glass of wine and felt very glum about things for a little while, and just did the same as everyone else, like passive aggressively baking my way, through pretending that I was in charge of my feelings. It just, I could feel it. The narrative felt wrong. Like, it didn't feel like a crisis. It felt like a crisis and a crisis and a crisis and a crisis. I've been volunteering for Extinction Rebellion, and so I'd done a residential piece of work around a program called Deep Adaptation, which is, climate crisis is inevitable. How we adapt to it is the chance. So I was feeling the sense of that crisis. Gone through my own personal crisis. It's quite clear that there's this looming democratic crisis, as we were in that very polarized moment, and that's not going away. So the crisis and a crisis and a crisis just felt like I was starring in a disaster show that was my own life. But this idea that new normal was the answer, I knew was an anathema, and that it's very natural for us to look to backward facing narratives, because in a moment of crisis, of course, we want to pretend that normal was good or build back better, which totally disassociates from the fact that normal was part of the problem that got us into that mess in the first place. So I knew, even though I was scared, that this was a moment for taking some risks, that in this great fragility, if we haven't been taking the biggest risks of our careers in the last 18 months, I worry that we're going to regret this. And as a generation, I worry that we'll regret that we allowed ourselves to be served up new normal as the answer to the opportunity that this uncertainty presented.
I am 100% with you on that. I sort of spent the first, 3 or 4 months trying to work out. I think we had that conversation. I mean, it's like the first minute that lockdown hit and the phone rang, it was never a nice conversation. It was business going all left, right, and centre. Not quite understanding what was happening next. We had Rankin on the show as well, and Rankin said the same thing. He said, look, in those first few weeks of lockdown, he was in absolute turmoil. He said, I didn't even know if I was going to have a business. And this is Rankin, as well. You sort of think, so it impacted absolutely everyone. And I remember the first opportunity I had to go and do some speaking, doing virtual stuff. And exactly what you said there, this idea, people are still banging on about this new normal. And I found this bit of graffiti art that somebody had written somewhere that said, why would we settle for the new normal when now's a chance to do something different? And like you, that's certainly been the rallying cry. And it was certainly a rallying cry for lots of...
I've been out tagging.
But I think there's a lot of people who, thankfully, who kind of rallied around that cause. And a lot of people said that during those moments of uncertainty, you know, those moments where they didn't know what they were doing, they suddenly became their most creative. And does that sound, is that something that happened for you? I know, for instance, Rankin, he went off and said, right, I'm just going to shoot flowers. He basically bought loads of flowers and started then burning them and shooting them, and refound this love for shooting still life that he would just never do. And then the art of photography and looking at selfies and all this sort of stuff. And he said it really fired up his creativity. But how did that work for you, Sam? Is that something that happened?
I think that there was there's a couple of lessons, I think, in the whole thing for me. And one of them is, in these moments of really profound, feel like you're at the edge of the cliff, fragility, there is a chance to really feel alive. And I did feel alive. And I didn't want to go down the path of dissonance and drinking more and, you know, denying all of it. And, you know, the Buddhists say there are only two truths in life: impermanence and death. And so the fundamental choice that we all make is, are we going to live a life of denial and fear? And I really hate the fucking Buddhists because they're so annoyingly right. Like, bloody Buddhists. For 2,500 years, they've been getting it right. And we keep reinventing this shit to get back to the same place. You're like, oh, bollocks. And sorry to any Buddhists out there, I don't really hate you at all. I'm just daunted by your infinite wisdom. And it's true, right? So there is, here's reality. And so when you really push towards reality, as I think it is our responsibility to do right now, you got to start asking some pretty, like, you know, significant questions. Like, that's truly the situation that we're in. Oh, right. Okay. You know, and of course, the reaction to that is distraction. Whoa, wait a minute. I don't like the fact that 30 people just died on a boat, or all the complexities that come underneath that as they were trying to get into the privileged country that I live in. I found myself scrolling Instagram 2 minutes later, like, you know, but moving away. It's so hard to face into the reality without leading to dissonance and distraction. So when you do, when it's forced upon you, the human capacity for creativity in these moments, and we know it, like history shows us again and again, when our backs are against the wall, we're on our knees, is when we find this profound level of creativity. And that's kind of the big opportunity in the moment. I don't see many solutions at the scale of the challenges we face, yet I know full well how, you know, statistically disproportionately well human beings have survived so far. And I have an innate confidence and optimism, not in human beings fully, because I think there are many aspects where human beings are really letting the side down, but in the kind of communities, hopefully, that are out listening to this, in the world of creativity, in the world of creative entrepreneurship, in the world of startups, in the world of, you know, the people pushing at the edges, finding solutions. Most of the most interesting ideas that I've seen over the last couple of years with profound opportunity for impact society and community and in the environment come from this world, you know, because there's so much thinking and there's so much of an unwillingness to accept the way things were, and a desire to do things different, and a proof point. And I think that up until a decade or two ago, all large change would have come from policy and top down. And I think that turning point, we're so close to it. And so I draw great inspiration that the level of uncertainty, if we can face into it and take how hard that's going to be, will amount to huge amounts of creativity, whether that's burning flowers or the projects that will come with it, because there's an aspect of us to be found and who we really are.
So what, all this uncertainty, you're going through significant changes, things are in flux, you're thinking of new things, and suddenly all the dots join, everything aligns. You're not setting for the new normal, you're thinking, well, what can we do differently? What can I do differently? And the uncertainty expert just pops into your head, or how does it become something that you developed, built?
I was so annoyed with the daily briefings, and we had this kind of like these. I was looking in my head. It became the story about where's the third plinth. There were two plinths, one of which was pseudo strategy, and that was Boris Johnson or someone else kind of fudging their way through, pretending to have a plan, and refusing to do the honest thing, which was say we don't know what to do.
Yeah,
and I think, and that's it. It's not in a leadership lexicon to be able to say, I don't know. Yeah, I think it's such an important skill for anybody in a position of leadership, even if you're only leading yourself, to be able to say in the 21st century, firstly, I don't know. Secondly, I believe in myself and the people around me to work it out. Because the day of being able to articulate 160 character vision that we all know was made up in a room, you know, to on the foundations of a spreadsheet that was also made up is got to be moved away from. And then there was the pseudoscience on the other side, which we have a complex relationship with. And there was no one in the middle, like, and maybe how many years ago that would have been a spiritual leader, or, and now we needed it to be like someone we really trust, like David Attenborough or Judi Dench, but someone just to say, it's all right, we're going to get there. We're going to work our way through this because this is what human beings do. And instead of this propensity to fall for falsehoods, it wasn't good. It wasn't good enough. And so I turned away from that. And because I had a lot of time on my hands, I just offered myself up to the, I know you've done lots and lots of work with young people, and I've done, it's a big part of my life. And I just put the call out saying, I'll give time to mentor you and your businesses and any of the challenges that you're facing. And I found myself inundated, like back to back calls, working with these smart young people. And their resilience and their readiness. And typically they were young people who'd come through Livity. So a large amount of them had gone through some degree of social exclusion or refugees or the challenges of life. And within them, I found the most resilient and innovative. And I was beginning to contrast it with quite a few grown-ups, if you will, like ex-clients or colleagues had come my way also, so asking if they could get a slot. And they were the ones falling apart, like me.
Wow, yeah.
And so I pushed it a bit further and went and spoke to some of the lads. I've done a lot of work in prisons in the justice system and spoke to those guys. And they really had like their lockdown strategy was great. Like they'd really turned around their businesses. And I wrote an article about it, just asking this question, like, are we missing a trick that at this exact moment, because of the fear, like we said at the beginning, because I'm nervous about this interview that I'm going to do, I'm going to write 20 really clear questions, and I like to be prepared, and that'll give us a very linear course. And when things are not linear, now I'm a bit lost. And then these guys were like, well, I've never really had a linear course. So in this moment of profound uncertainty, I feel a readiness for it and a degree of creativity that I'm ready to kick into gear. And I called them uncertainty experts, and it was a glib term. And then the article went viral, and I began to think there's something in this. And it was a series of articles that I started writing in a way to kind of frame my own thoughts. The first one had been, is this too early to like be optimistic? People are dying, but is there a chance to think about this uncertainty as a chance to really do things differently? And something that I'd done differently, I've written on Medium and written in lots of places, and I just put a survey at the bottom of the essay. Yeah. And just said, I'd like to know what you think on 3 or 4 questions about this. And so this interactive loop had begun. And when I posted the uncertainty experts, I got thousands of responses telling me about people who've got experience of uncertainty. So it began in a very messy way. And I had lots of suggestions, and people I began speaking to were ex-smugglers who'd become trauma specialists, ex-gang leaders who'd become business leaders. And I was looking again for this paradox, and my definition had to be someone who'd had such a prolonged exposure to uncertainty that it kind of rewired their brain. And then they'd use the skills learned in the shadows of uncertainty to become leading lights in society. So they'd had double success. They'd been a very good gang leader. They'd been a successful refugee. They'd managed to escape being a prisoner of war. And then they'd become a CEO, a leader in more recognizable terms to most of us. And the crucial thing was they'd use the same skills. And by my definition, that meant that they had something to teach us about the uncertainty that we're going through. And then I assembled this lineup and began workshopping it, not really sure where it would go, but this is where it got us.
And it's what's interesting for me is, as you talk through all that, there's 2 things. And one of them, I want to get into the science bit in a second, but I just find it fascinating that there is this, like you say, there's this kind of societal norm where you see CEOs and you see very successful people, and we make assumptions. Yeah, and let's just say, like Rankin, for example, I just thought, well, those kind of people are going to just, everyone makes it through. They're not going to worry. They've got big business. They've got it all nailed. And we have our own version of a script in our head. Well, those people are already successful. They're just going to sail through, and the world's going to be fine eventually. And the reality is that none of those people, I mean, actually, there's always that thing that nobody's got a clue about anything, really. We're all playing a big game, right? But some people are playing it to those rules. But there's this kind of counterintuitive thing of, well, there's all these people over here who we would never assume are smart business people or can manage things or can be CEOs. And suddenly they were coming to the fore. And I would see it again on LinkedIn. I'd see it in the newspapers. I'd see it, everything from the lowly, and I mean lowly in terms of perception, but brilliant in execution. But people creating seamstresses creating PPE or creating thousands, raising enough money to make 500,000 masks for people, to pub owners who were transforming their pubs into art spaces or food shops, or all this massive entrepreneurialism and thinking coming from areas that you just would never have thought of traditionally, and all the big governmentals, the big societal, organizational thing crumbling around us. And yet, I think we were talking earlier, people finding it difficult to have a frame of reference of this guy was a gang leader, now as a CEO, like how does that all work? But the idea of these brilliant skill sets transforming people's lives and perceptions and ways of being, to go from gang leader, brilliant CEO, refugee, business owner, I think prisoner of war, absolutely, to, speaker and everything else. What struck you about those stories and people's reactions to them, and how people engaged with the experts?
I started reading around this and looking into it. The thing that really, uncertainty, there's no one probably on the call today who's been annoyed at the uncertainty in their life today. Like, God, this has been a tough Thursday, so much uncertainty, right? It's been a very fucking difficult proposition to sell, because no one's really walking around going home and complaining to their partner. The uncertainty. It's the anxiety that I'm facing. It's the exhaustion. It's the fact that I keep waking up at 4 a.m. It's the unreliability of my workflow, clients, everybody's, I don't know whether people are going to show up to this event, fucking COVID. Like, of course, it's all of those things. And in the broader sense of those things, it's the climate crisis. It's the ongoing dissonance around diversity. It's social inequality, and where we see in every single aspect of our lives, or the fallibility of democracy. But the thing that connects all of them, the meta threat, the end of level baddie that joins the dots on all of those, is a thing called uncertainty. So to frame it, to name the real problem, to not have that horrible thing where, okay, I've just about managed my anxiety levels until tomorrow comes a new threat, to go, right, okay, what's our chance to connect all of these things? That's what I first found by looking at the uncertainty experts from such different walks of life, the similar thing. What are look to our similarities and differences. And so in naming this underlying challenge, all of a sudden the research really, really backs it up. Like, uncertainty is the number one driver of economic instability. Oh, according to the World Uncertainty Index, and that's a real thing, and it's existed for a couple of years. I wasn't here first. According to numerous bits of scientific research, here says this is the most uncertain time in all human existence. I mean, they've released the files, haven't they? We nearly blew ourselves into nuclear oblivion back in January. It's like a threat. Uncertainty is the number one driver of anxiety disorder globally, whether it's the uncertainty of just getting through the day or the uncertainty of a public event. So there is something to be done by wrestling the unseen real challenge behind the scenes, naming it, framing it. And then what I discovered was these people who'd got really good at it in this difficult to conceive, conceptual aspect, and then bumped into all this fucking scientific research. And in the science world, they'd really, in both science and economics, they'd really identified as uncertainty as the driver of these, let's call it the cause of the symptoms that we're more readily trying to address. And, I like answers, and I like giving people actionable things that they can go and do. And that's when it began to really join up, because I was talking to the guy who was an ex-smuggler, and he was giving me really brilliant guidance on team management and managing difficult bosses, because his boss had been an absolute psychopath. And it was great. It was really relatable, really transferable skills. And I was like, mate, who would have thought such transferable skills from being a smuggler? And he's like, yeah, great. Well, and we started talking about techniques for navigating uncertainty. He was drawing me diagrams, what he learned when he was an apprentice smuggler.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't think it was going to be this transferable.
Yeah.
Take away the product. And again, in speaking to the first refugee that I spoke to who become a CEO, who was, adamant that in the years of struggle, and showed up in London unable to speak English with a carrier bag, ended up building a pizza chain called Fire Azza, which he sold to Pizza Express. That's not insignificant success. No. And he put it down to the journey that he had to go on, standing in a kitchen, making some decisions about his life, in which he decided the thing that separated him from everyone else in that kitchen was that he'd seen civil war. His father had been called to a concentration camp, and his desire to make change. And he'd been a civil engineer in the country he was from. I was a success there. I'm going to be a success here. And he found his path to it. So I couldn't not listen. There was something there that I wasn't getting from Boris Johnson at the time, in terms of inspiration and actionable steps.
Well, I mean, each of those stories feels like, there's a kind of an epiphany moment that somebody has that's the culmination of a whole load of experiences, moments in time, and quite contrasting. I guess if you do a bell curve of life, a lot of people just go straight down the average path, and we don't really manage and experience those extremes. And therefore, when uncertainty hits us, it's like, what? This is, whereas these people have gone, they're at this extreme. They've experienced loads and loads and loads of different things.
No, but we have. So I got to work with this. So Dr. Avery Bilovich, PhD, I was introduced to. It turns out he's the lead researcher, worldwide award-winning scientist. I was so lucky to get to work with him. And he'd been heading up a thing called the Decision Making in Uncertainty Laboratory, which is a niche department within the Brain Sciences Lab at UCL. I mean,
Gosh, I mean, what?
Lucky find. And so he designed, him and an incredible creative scientist called Catherine Templar-Lewis, who's a neuroscience and psychology specialist, put together a bunch of assessments around it. So it stopped being just like this inspirational talk with some exciting characters. And there's a quantity. So you did and anyone can do, if you're interested in this stuff, there's a free test at uncertaintyexperts.com, and it will give you a genuine and robust scientific evaluation of your current levels of uncertainty tolerance. But for the program, we designed a 6-part evaluation measure. So there's a quantitative result, and we can prove that we did increase nearly everyone's tolerance to uncertainty. But within the show, there's a series of qualitative reflections, and people are asked. So you meet one of the uncertainty experts. Let's say you meet Dr. Ming. You see some of my interview with her. She's a computational neuroscientist, heralded by the Financial Times as one of the world's LGBT leaders. She's saved countless lives. Her work is just extraordinary. She's built algorithms that can help people with bipolar disorder predict their next outbreak with 90% accuracy. She's insane. But she began life as a suicidal depressive as a man, nearly took his own life until came to terms with his identity, went through gender transition. And so the experience of uncertainty is profound. She's telling you about uncertainty and some of her experiences. And then the questions that she asked me appear to you, and they arrive on your phone. And then I have this really awkward moment as a presenter where I have to be quiet for 2 minutes, looking at the audience on screen whilst they're answering this question that's coming from this uncertainty expert on their phone that's going into an anonymized system. And so these qualitative reflections come through, and then they're anonymized, assessed by behavioral psychologists. And get this, we work with Eni Tumala Akana, I think is her name, who's the world's first empathy designer. She's the empathy designer for the Finnish government. I mean, who knew?
Wow.
And then we get these reflections back. And the point of telling you all of this is because one of the questions we asked was, what is the greatest adversity in your life that you're proudest to have overcome? And then a follow-up question is, and what did you learn from it? What powers did it give you? And there was not a soul. So there were 500 people in the pilot back in May, 2,000 people on this one. No one did not name a very significant adversity. And
wow.
In the anonymized data that we get back, it goes from divorce to death to depression to disorders. I mean, there wasn't a single person who didn't put down something pretty serious. And then when you look at the lessons that we got from it, it's strength, it's resilience, it's resolve, it's perspective. There was not one blank cell. So all of us have faced something, we will all be put to our knees by life. We have been before, we will be again. And that's it, right? Because we also know that uncertainty drives this moment of near breakdown or breakthrough. And so it will happen to us unquestionably. What is within question and within our control is our response. And can we prime ourselves? Can we train ourselves so that when that happens, we're more likely to come back with the breakthrough moment? Yes, we can.
I mean, that is incredible that everybody has had. And I guess what you're saying is it's not kind of like relative. I mean, it is relative speaking, but everybody's had some significant thing that from the back of it will either make or break you, as it were.
Exactly.
And I guess it's how you deal with it.
Lots of different things, you know, trying to get it right. You know, what's your greatest fear? Or, you know, and lots of time when the question didn't land, people would fill in the room. I don't understand this question. I'm not sure what you mean. This hasn't happened to me. You know, I've never been a gang leader. You know, but in the honing of it, but on that one question, no, that's unequivocal. And the insights it gave us was really, you know, on that other question, what's your greatest fear? I think it's 76% of people who've been through it said their greatest fear was a fear of failure. And that makes sense. Totally get that. There's deep rooted levels why we wouldn't want to fail, and we all feel that. No, you know, all that bullshit about fail fast, fail better. Fine, it makes a great poster, but no one actually wants to fail. I certainly fucking don't. And but then latterly in the third episode, the RAF pilot you mentioned earlier on, he talks about being tortured, being in prison, having a gun held to his head, and what happens is in that moment, he's deciding how he's going to decide to die. And a word comes to mind of how he wants to be remembered, how he wants to die, and he doesn't die. And he escapes and tells that story as well. It's a very positive story. But so the reflection that he gives to the audience is to try and choose a word in the same way that he discovered the word he wants to, you know, what do you not want to regret, basically, is what it gets to. And so when people are asked what they don't want to have as a regret in their life, it was 89% of people said missed opportunity. So you draw these two things together. What is most likely to lead to missed opportunity? Oh, fear of failure. Right, and then we can present that back to the audience. So we totally get it. Everyone's got a fear of failure, of course. But what would be much worse is missed opportunity. So next time you're presented with the fear of failure, remember that in the future, way more important to you is not having a sense of regret over the missed opportunity. Now reframe that fear of failure immediately, because you don't want to be that person down the line.
Exactly.
And it was like, oh my God, breakthrough for us, breakthrough for everyone. I was like, oh, right, okay, great. That gives that. And then we then said, that's almost all of you. There's 2,000 of you here. That means that 1,700 of you are saying this is what's real to you. And another 8, you know, whatever. Can't do the maths. But that sense of being together and having these realizations together and admissions together was really, I mean, we teared up a few times, I tell you.
What I love about that is, you know, it's the simplicity of the dots, and of course, you know, joining those dots. When you say those two things together, well, you know, missing out on opportunity as a big regret is driven by fear of failure.
Yeah,
I bet, you know, like you say, people in the room just like, oh yeah, that's so true. It's so simple. It's not rocket science, let's say. However, of course, you know, we all know getting to simplicity is not easy in the slightest. And also, there's a lot of science that's gone into the work to get to that point that you've created.
Yeah.
So you've said you've had some lucky finds, of course, but you know, luck is relative as well. You've obviously gone into it and started digging, but you've already spoke to us and told us about 2 or 3 departments I'd never even knew existed, let alone the studies that they did would even be something that people would look into. And as a result, we've got empathy designers, all sorts of things. But what's the science that sits behind this? And can you give us some pointers, just in practical layperson's terms, of some of the stuff that you found that we might recognize so we can do some reframing ourselves tonight as well?
Absolutely. So it was during the research, I recruited someone to help me find the uncertainty expert stories who used to work on reality TV. Because, you know, reality TV is based on finding extreme characters. Yeah. So I thought she'd be a brilliant person to help me find the characters in the show. Well, one of which was Dr. Ming, who I told you about. And she began to say, well, you know, this is why this is working. And she gave me a bit of a sense of the neuroscience. That led me to Catherine Templar-Lewis, who's just the most extraordinary person I've ever met. She's got 3 masters. Like, she used to star in horror films. She's just this incredible future guest material. She's insanely massively inspirational. And it was in lockdown, and so we had this really funny exchange, just all on voice notes. She was always too busy to get a call with, of her beginning. And I was saying, so this is the consistent theme across everyone I've interviewed, and what's that about? And she go, oh, well, have you ever heard of negativity bias? I went, no. Well, the reason why in uncertainty people default to the worst is all human beings have an ingrained negativity bias that's about 10 to 1. So of every 10 opportunities that you get sent your way, Scott, Normally, you'd assume 9 of them are too risky and one of them is probably worth a shot. And that's a survival thing that was put into us as we evolved as human beings to keep us alive, right? That's probably a safe ratio. Yeah. Psychologists estimate that's risen to about 201 in the dawn of the 21st century, partly due to pandemics and all the threats around us. So broadly speaking, if you extrapolated 200 to 1 over the course of a day, for example, that would mean there's about 15 minutes when you're thinking, yeah, I might give that a try. Versus 23 hours and 45 minutes when you go, no chance, Buster.
Yes.
That's not going to play out well. And the usefulness of that is our starting point. Our ingrained survival instincts is telling us again and again to keep us alive. Don't try this out. Don't take that risk. You know, that's not just stepping. That's speaking out loud at a meeting. That's how you're presenting yourself. That's what, are we going to show up today and not ask preordain the questions? And it was like, wow, that's really who we are. And she's a great science communicator. She's given me all this confidence, because I have a huge imposter syndrome. Like, I'm non-academic. You know, we talked about this with Being a Pirate. The dyslexic, non-academic, didn't even manage to make it to university. And here I am, like, hanging out with scientists from like specialist labs at UCL who are very excited about my intervention. Please don't call it an intervention. And so and then she helped me with the research of it. And then we were very, very lucky that the pilot, some Netflix execs came to the pilot, and they pre-bought hundreds and hundreds of tickets to the season that we've just run, which gave me a bit of development funding to kind of like get it better. And they gave me so much creative input and so much like strategic support. It was wonderful. And one of their key bits of advice was, you need to present this with Catherine. They saw me and Catherine do a Q&A, and they're like, you need that woman standing next to you. She, you do a very good job of telling the stories of the uncertainty experts, but by God, it's much better when she's explaining the science. So 3 weeks to go before the show went on air, they made this suggestion, and we knew it was true. And so we had to rewrite, re-rehearse everything. And it was wonderful, because suddenly the science landed in a completely different way. And these concepts were profound, and things that really stuck with people. I know negativity bias really stuck with people, but something that she said that kind of wraps all of this up is, towards the end, many of the exercises that we presented to people during the show were to encourage them. There's a thing called Interreception, which is your brain's ability to understand what's going on within the body. So you've got kids, I've got kids, when kids don't really know whether they're hungry or they're nervous, and they're just complaining about tummy ache, you have to help them navigate. And by increased interoception, we get in touch with our best decision-making skills, which is what leads to this thing called embodied cognition, which I'd never heard of, but it's the most radical idea in cognitive science. And the brain picks up about 50 pieces of information per second, and the body picks up about 11 million. Like, the body is literally our interface with the world. The brain relies on the eyes and what you can see in front of you, which is a very limited spectrum. The body is picking up on what you can hear. It's 360 degrees. It's audible, and the body makes decisions. You walk into a room and you know who you feel you can trust. You know that, something doesn't feel okay. You have an experience, and there's a whole set of assimilation going on. And the idea of embodied cognition, well, actually, the research within embodied cognition is there are 2 decision-making centers. It's a shorthand to say there are 2 brains. That's not true. There's a brain, but your body's receptors interpret events and give you feelings which allow you to make judgments. And it is equally accurate to the ones we make in our brain. Equally accurate. So you have 2 decision-making centers, body and brain. And when they work together, we know that artificial intelligence has in some ways outpaced human thinking in chess and various other things. But there's no technology that even can come close to this dual idea. What? And once you understand that, this thing called dualism came around when Descartes invented it, that we ordain the brain and the body is just a vehicle for bringing it around. And all of a sudden, you're like, wait a minute. Like, and this goes back to the work in the decision-making laboratory in uncertainty. Some of the key work of what do human beings do when there isn't rational and available information to make decisions? And much of their work has pulled it back to this place, which is the answers will come from the instincts that we get better at attuning, which is understanding how our body is interfacing with the world and how it informs our brain. Like, fuck me. We're back to the bloody Buddhists.
And I guess we call that, am I right in saying we call that gut instinct?
We would shorthand that as gut instinct, yes. And there are lots of things you can do to enhance and attune your gut instinct, but it also connects to the thing we were touching on just before, predictive processing. The brain is thought to be this prediction machine, updating reality and how you perceive reality based on the predictions that it's making all the time. And those predictions, worryingly, can be informed by reality and non-reality. They can be informed by dreams, other people's experiences, really deep immersive culture. And so, yeah, you get to the bottom of a lot of it and you're like, well, how on earth we make it through the day? And then sometimes it's both worryingly complex and worryingly basic. And the brain simply likes to repeat what it's done before, and it's a bit unhappy when things don't go as expected. You know, our body is like sensory overload, can pick up on this stuff, and yet we make our decisions up top. And you're like, wow, like, why isn't this like more widely available? And that's one of the great things Catherine taught. She's what they call an interdisciplinarian. I'd have to digest these scientific papers, go through them till finally get to the point they were trying to make. Like, why have you made this so complicated? It's really exciting. It's really interesting. Why have you made it so boring?
Yeah. But I mean, it is almost like back, in a way, back to Buddhism, in that it seems that as we get older or as we mature, we end up putting more and more barriers in place. And actually, then we spend a lot of our life trying to regress back to reconnecting with everything around us and seeking almost, say, enlightenment and all that. So we build all this baggage around us to protect us, when actually what we really need to do is strip a lot of it back. And when you're a kid, of course, lots of things you just do on gut instincts. Lots of things you just don't have the fear. You 1 out of 10 things you go, I'll just do 5 out of 10. That wall looks good, I'm going to jump off of it. And you're certainly probably not thinking about 200 things and all the risk around it.
You're not just thinking, you're feeling. And jumping off the wall feels good. You feel alive.
Yeah.
You're having an experience. And the experience of life tells you again and again, you know, we hear that creativity is like the number one skill we should all be aiming towards. But if we look around ourselves, we know that we're told conformity is the number one thing. So we try and conform. And success brings with it stability. And stability means we have to slow down. And we've got things that we now need to look after, and responsibility. And these are all the trappings of it. And so then you, of course, naturally take away from uncertainty, which would present itself as a risk. But all of the things we've touched on, right? The facts of the matter are the world is getting more uncertain, and our ability to deal with uncertainty is the one thing that we get to choose. Uncertainty is rooted in creativity, absolutely rooted in it. So our chance to be more creative with what's to come is going to be informed dramatically by our ability to embrace uncertainty. In fact, there's probably no greater or more important skill, in fact, ever, that keeps human beings not just alive, but enjoying themselves, than their ability to creatively deal with the unknown. And that's something to be embraced, enjoyed, and celebrated. But much of the structures around us would suggest the opposite.
Yeah.
You know, get to stability, get to security. And that is a difficult paradox to face. And it's, again, one that the Buddhists have got answers for.
I mean, I'm totally with you. And I was actually quite shocked when I did the survey, because I like to think of myself as, thriving through, I've never really had that structured in my brain. I thought I've never really had that structured a career process, or, I'm quite happy with a bit of flux, and everything I've worked on and worked in has been quite, and then actually just thinking about it after I did, sitting for an hour and thinking, actually, I've had a really quite linear career. And for many years, that's what I wanted. I wanted stability. I wanted this. It was only in the last 7 years when I took that step of real uncertainty and started my own business. And then I think going through lockdown, the uncertainty of that, whether I was embracing the uncertainty or whether I was looking for the stability, is one of, that's probably an interesting debate to have. Like, did I embrace uncertainty and go, right, these are all the opportunities I could have? Or did I seek stability and go, I need to lock all this down to get it into something that I can really embrace and manage? And we talked about these things. I think you call them security, what are they called? Security behaviors or safety behaviors.
Yeah, safety behaviors. And we all do the thing that you just said, and there's no way of escaping it. Self-validation. So you look back at the decisions you've made, and on the whole, you are going to judge them as good. You're going to judge that path in the best possible light you can, because you need to keep yourself alive, right? And that's way beyond your control. And so we all have slightly rose-tinted spectacles on life, and we have a greater tendency to forget or rewrite the things that we didn't do that well. It takes a lot of self-awareness, but also it's very difficult. No one wants to walk around beating themselves up the whole time. So it's useful to understand that. Safety behaviors is I didn't want to include it in the beginning because I thought it sounded too basic, and didn't sound very scientific. And I was like really keen to show off my new science skills. Here's my new science mates. And safety behaviors just sound a bit, But it's a concept in psychology that when a threat presents itself, rather than address the cause of that threat, because that's even more scary, it's short-term fix. So my partner's angry at me. Oh my God, I don't want to get into like resolving whatever the deep issue is or my insecurities that might lead to that. No. I'll just start a fight because I'm good at a fight. We'll escalate this. I'll take you down. Or, oh dear, work's been really difficult today. I don't want to get into the root cause of that, but maybe there's something wrong or there's a structural challenge in my proposition. So I'm just going to have a glass of wine and like call them a bunch of bastards instead. And, safety behaviors can be drink, procrastination, eating, simple stuff that gives us a short-term sense of comfort. And that comes from evolution. And a long time ago, that would just be like getting out of the way. And it's our sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. This was brilliant as well, by the way, slight distraction. Everyone knows fight or flight. I didn't know there's 7 Fs. Actually,
7.
Yeah,
I didn't know that. I knew there were 3. I thought, but not 7. Wow.
You've got fight, flight, and
freeze.
Aha. You've got fawn. Another good way to get out of a difficult situation. Desperately trying to appease a person or a threat. Feed. Immediate response to a challenge. Get some energy inside you. Put some food away.
Oh.
Fuck your way out of the situation. Fees, fight, please. Anyway, a prize for whoever can come up with the 7th.
Who keeps adding them? Who keeps adding them up? Who's the governance on adding to the Fs? So is it
science.
Science. Yeah. The answer is always science.
The gods of science. Anyway, those sympathetic nervous system responses trigger these sensations in our body that then push us. Chemicals go into our body, which then mean that you desperately want some kind of resolution to that horrible upset that it feels like. So you want something that's going to regulate it. And so we go for a safety behavior response. And it was fascinating. I was like, oh my God. And once I'd started talking to others about safety behaviors, everyone, after, running it as a 2-hour workshop or a different philosophy, different methods, people come back to me going, what really stayed with me is safety behaviors. And
yeah,
and we see it from the 2,000 people who have gone through it this time. Number 1 and 2 were food and alcohol, and the others were kind of procrastination, burying yourself in work. But savior complexes was very high up. Starting fights was very high up. And then we asked the people a second question: what's their sneakiest safety behavior? What's the safety behavior that you would be uncomfortable admitting? There was a lot of gambling. There's a lot of online porn. There was a lot of shoplifting. There was a lot of things that we do to really distract ourselves. Give yourself a hit and pull yourself away from whatever it is that's really worrying you. And it's it's a well-known psychological construct. And the opportunity is, because we do these things literally automatically. If any of you have ever found yourself with a glass of wine in your hand, not really knowing quite how it got there, and then you can trace it back to the conversation you had half an hour before that gave you that horrible internal feeling of like, oh, right. And now I can join the dots up. We woke up in the morning. Why did we have that fight anyway? Oh, 1 hour before something triggered in me. And it's a short-term safety response, but counterintuitively, they then make safer. Our opportunity is to switch them to their healthy alternative, which is known as a coping strategy. And you can train this. So if booze was your one, when you get to use these interoceptive or embodied cognition skills, I've got that slight feeling of tightness in my chest. I've got that, I've got that antagonistic, something's triggered me. So my new response to this is going to be whatever. I really like in these moments to get X on the phone and debate the fuck out of it. Or this is the moment in which I'm going to go for a sprint. This is the moment. And our brain is in some ways so very, very basic that this is the whole philosophy of why it takes 9 days to form a habit. It's called a neural pathway, that your response to that event is now triggering a different choice. And it's what the basis of CBT and everything else is. By developing an awareness of that sensation leads to that behavior, you can reprogram that pattern. And that makes it sound really simple. And in some ways it is. Obviously the hard work is actually to do it. But if done right and you stick to it, you can replace those safety behaviors in your life with coping strategies by rewiring neural pathways.
It's fantastic. Absolutely. I mean, what it does gives me personally the hope that I can, graduate from apprentice all the way up to expert at some stage. But what are the other? You're like me. You love to give people some practical action to go and take away from here. And there's a lot in here, definitely about self-awareness, like you just said. The moment when you pick up that glass of wine, or you have that cigarette, or you, I don't know, switch on some online stuff that you don't really want to do, be thinking about what's triggered me, what's happening here, what's happening for me, and build that self-awareness. But are there any other sort of tools you've used, or tricks, or reframing, or things that you've done that other people can literally try this evening?
Yeah, there are. One of the things that we finish up on that I was not aware of at all is a thing called the reticular activation system.
Oh.
Right? It is the, Catherine describes it as the door. If you think of a nightclub, it is the doorman of your brain. And it chooses who you do and don't let in. And you only want good people in your nightclub, right? Don't you? Right? You want the people whose assembly will turn it into a sense of party and celebration. You don't want those dodgy buggers. And it's of your body and all these different receptors. So it's really important. It literally is the gateway, and it's called the gateway of alertness and attention. And you can prime it to the things that you, so we know about negativity bias, right? We're generally assuming the worst. So you can prime this aspect of your brain to be more receptive to the things you want it to be. It's basically like the cookies on a website.
Okay. Good
so
cookies. The
cookies of life. So you just Google those nice new pair of sneakers, and now wherever you go, you see adverts for those sneakers.
Yeah.
It's why you're now going to, we leave this call and you'll keep spotting safety behaviors everywhere. Like, because you're like, that's an interesting concept. And your reticular activation system has gone, that's an interesting concept. Like Netflix. Netflix recommends. Oh, right, great. That's good because it's seen what you like. So let's do a quick experiment, right? Where are you? You're at work.
I'm at home.
You're at home. Okay, so please, everyone around us enjoying this, listening in, look around you, look all the way around you and try and spot anything that you can that has a red hue to it. Red, scarlet, vermilion, whatever kind of aspects of red that you want. There might be very small amounts of red. There might be flecks of red. There might be big red books. There might be red lights. There might be just dashes of red on the side of something. I don't know. Not in your room. But just see whatever you can that's red. Okay. Got it? Spotted? Little bits, big bits. Who knows what room you're in. Now, please shut your eyes. Shut them really, really tight. Really, really tight. And now use the incredible memory banks you've got to re-go through everything you just looked at. But keeping your eyes closed, re-scan the room. Think of those red things and really, really focus on them. So pick out the red things, zoom in on them, put a spotlight on them, lean towards them, try and grab them mentally, focus specifically on the red things, really call those red things to mind, whether it was books, pens, whatever it was. Okay, got the red things?
Yeah.
Everybody really clearly got the red things in their mind? Okay, then open your eyes and just scan back around the room. And what you will find is your eyes are drawn towards those red things, unusually fast. And those hues pick out unusually bright, unusually visceral. Suddenly, red is now, your awareness to red is far greater than it was a minute ago.
I had a little red shadow. I had a little like, when you blink, red was pigging off. Yep.
It's a reticular activation. So you can do that. And it's been hijacked by things like The Secret and cosmic ordering and various other things. Yeah. And there's no way that you can ask the universe to give you a new car and you're going to wake up with a new car. Right? That's nonsense. But if you are thinking about buying a new car at the moment and you're really obsessing about whether it's going to be the new whatever, the Volkswagen or the electric, you will see that car every bloody way you go. Yeah. And that's your reticular activation system. So it can get you. And so if you want to be, I really, really want to be more. And so my world has been full of we think it's Alexa listening into us. And so she's informing our feed. And it is that too. But this is our mental version of it. And it's really, when you think back to the brain can only process like 50 bits of information per second compared to the body's 11 million bits. What do you want to fill that up? And now the natural tendency for the brain, because of negativity bias, is to keep you alive. So you're way more alert to the news of refugees, the news of next catastrophe, the news of the economic breakdown. And so you're filling it up. And so it's kind of our responsibility to be very intentional. This little gateway triggers, it's our alertness and awareness. It's what helps us wake up in the morning, the reticular activation system, and what we first focus on. And so it does connect to all that stuff for our manifestation. I don't mean to be dismissive of it because I think there's some very, very helpful and good work that we've done. But I just didn't know that existed. And once you do a few experiments and you're like, oh my God, and you will, because of safety behaviors, we've talked about it 2 or 3 times now, is going to interest you. I guarantee you, a week from now, I'll say, have you spotted any safety behaviors, Scott? You're like, they're bloody everywhere.
Yeah, loads. I've got loads. One question I have had for you, Sam, because I've been following what you've been doing, obviously on Instagram and stuff as well, and seeing your photos and your lives. Your jumper, which has been a constant feature that you are wearing. Can you show the audience? Yeah, tell us the story. I mean, I know what it figuratively means, but it's
well, it connects the dots between the two things. So the kind of what seems like pretty comprehensive failure of the discussions at COP26. I heard from someone in strategy around COP26 and the kind of climate sustainability debates and how uncertainty is a kind of key word in what they're trying to do. The only way of achieving the kind of hope, the now incredibly optimistic targets we've got of not ending up in a world probably riven by climate wars, shortages, and horror show, is partly by a kind of net zero revolution, the likes that we haven't seen since the end of the Second World War or the Industrial Revolution. But to do that means we need businesses and technologies that don't exist yet. So the uncertain world that the people at Shell need to embrace and go, okay, we're actually not going to do any more fossil fuels. We're going to try and maintain the size of our business. We're going to still deliver shareholder profits. Fucking hell. And we're going to build some technologies that don't exist yet. Like, that means and requires a mindset of real uncertainty. And the danger is they're a horribly big metaphor of people going, we're just going to rely on the old-fashioned pattern a little bit longer. And of course, how hardwired are they to a form of success and massive income by fossil fuel extraction? And so the shirt is a demonstration of the reality of our inability to look away from these backward-looking narratives and what it's going to cost us, and the benefits of really stepping into a space of uncertainty because of the innovation and the creativity that it will bring you. And I spotted it online, and this guy called Spelling Mistakes Cost Lives, and he does really great work. He's one of the people behind the Museum of Neoliberalism, and so I looked into his work, and it turns out I used to go to school with him.
No way.
Yeah, I don't think I liked him at school. Anyway.
Like him now.
Yeah, I do. It's amazing, mate. I really love your work.
Yeah.
I thought you were a bit fat at the time. So, it just goes to show all things go round in circles, don't they?
It's fun, isn't it? Because on the one hand, we've got that lack of embracing the world of uncertainty. But then on the other hand, I was thinking the other day about the phenomenon, how true it is or not. But I mean, I do speak to a lot of people, and it's very real for them and their businesses. But this idea of the great resignation, and I hate just to use media phrases, but this idea that people are stepping away from certainty, stability, career, whatever, and stepping out into the great unknown. I'm just going to go and do something. I don't even know what I'm going to do in some cases, but I know that this isn't what I want to do. And they're kind of stepping into the unknown. Or is that a safety behavior?
No, I think that's something that we saw a lot. We've done lots of, the audience that have been through the programs have stayed with us and very connected to us, and there's a big community talking about how they're embracing uncertainty and what it leads to. And a massive part of that is people there's not many people who don't have some kind of project or plan that they would like to go and realize. And a massive part of that was people changing their careers, changing their job within the same organization, standing up for something that they believe in, people taking on fights and activisms that they wanted to get behind, but for whatever reasons felt like they were being held back. People who were addressing aspects of relationships. I've had people talking about how they've changed and saved their marriage because they were finally able to conflict things that caused them fear. So I think they're connected. And my guess would be that the really interesting thing that sits behind it, and I think you're right, like the great resignation is probably a bit trite. The great sense of connection, the great sense of what's important, the great reevaluation. The great reevaluation is probably what that really is touching on, which would be the more interesting thing to get to. The reevaluation of what's important. We were shown the importance of connection and community by the absence of it. Many people discovered a connection with nature by having been excluded from it, and it's a cliche, isn't it? But you don't know what you got till it's gone. So having things threatened means that we rediscover the importance and the value of them. And it goes back to where we started. If the only guarantees of life are impermanence and death, then do you want to spend your life in fear and denial, or do we want to accept the reality of this? And when you make that choice, then you're going to start making some pretty different decisions.
What a wonderful conversation. I wish we didn't have to end it, Sam. The only certainty is time, and we do need to honor that. But listen, it has been absolutely fantastic and fascinating and thrilling and insightful as ever. hearing what you've been up to, hearing about the uncertainty experts. And indeed, I just know people listening to this, we'll record it as well and we share it with the group. They will get loads out of the practicalities and the things that they can do. But how also can people get involved with it, Sam, on an even more practical level if they really want to get engaged? What else can they do to get involved with it?
If you want to get really practical, we come and buy a ticket.
Exactly. How do we do that?
We're going to do it as a series of live events next year, just for next year. I've got no intention of doing it beyond that. Each session is going to evolve, so there'll be new uncertainty experts each time, but it will be broadly the similar construct. We're just going to keep trying to refine it and fine tune it. The February dates have just gone up, May dates are going to go up, and there'll be either 2 or 3 more in the year, July, September, and November probably. And what we're hoping to get is 20,000 people through the entire process, and that will make it the world's largest experiment in uncertainty. We'll have measures the entire way through. And one thing that I've loved about the scientific community, which I didn't really experience in past lives, is the openness. Everything has to be open source. So we'll be open sourcing the data, the insights, all the things that we discover along the way, the methodology. You know, we've had scores that are similar to what you might expect with kind of online CBT therapy, you know, but through a documentary experience. So if we can prove that, and we've already proved it, if we can prove it at scale, you know, we've really got something. If we can escalate the conversations that we've had with the supporters from Netflix and others, like, imagine what we could begin to do if you can add those kind of aspects to a format and an entertainment format that we really enjoy. So what we're looking for is people to get involved, to support, to promote, to spread the word. The tickets are all up for now, like I think 2/3 of the price, and they'll stay that way until the new year. But if anyone's had a hard time, if anyone's gone through what we went through or Rankin went through, there's also a discount code on the checkout, so you can just put that in and you get 80% of the ticket price off if you're a frontline worker or student. So we don't want cost to be any kind of barrier. We just want people who want to embrace the experiment, come and get involved and throw themselves into it, and then contribute to the science.
Wonderful. So sign up, join in, get comfortable with uncertainty, because I've been following it and seeing what you've been doing. I'm thrilled with it. I think and I've just learned so much this evening as well. I'm going to sign up, Sam.
You're going to come along?
I'm going to come along. I'm making that commitment now live, so I can't go back on it. But I think it just sounds so fascinating that I'm going to do it. Listen, thanks ever so much, Sam, for joining us on Boom Time. This will be, obviously this is recorded. We'll be sharing it out with everybody, and we'll have our next guests in the new year. We take a break for Christmas, and then we'll be back in the new year with more guests and more different and interesting shows and different ways of bringing incredible speakers to your screens and hopefully back into real life as well as we start doing that. So have a wonderful Christmas, have a wonderful break, relax, and we'll see you all in the new year. And until then, everybody, thanks for joining us and stay boom. Thank you.